in general over the last couple of years just doesn't bear thinking about. The way the government have been pushing the fear factor, as I call it, and it is building up. They'll find more people to arrest. I mean, they've got something, or the government are looking for something to hold them in place for the next elections. Well, I've got bad news for them. I think they're going the wrong way about it. You know, they should be looking at our health system, not the way people make phone calls and talk openly to each other. You know, that's one way of trying to suppress people's statements to each other about situations that are happening around the world. You're not allowed to say that anymore. So I'd just like to thank the No War Coalition for giving me the chance to speak to you tonight. And it's a privilege to be speaking with Tim Anderson. And I'd like to welcome Omar. Welcome to the world of James Bond, mate. And why I say that, I mean, the last couple of days has proved that if you're not in the need to know, they won't tell you anything. You've got to start digging, trying to approach people to find out when David Hicks is leaving, when is he going to get home. So I have the opportunity to impart on to the media to say, instead of saying I don't know, I'll be able to say, yes, I know, but I can't impart that information. But this has been part of the Australian government's attitude for the 5.5 years I've been tied up with this campaign for David. It's been a long road. It's been a very interesting road. I've met a lot of interesting people. I think one's here tonight, actually, Curtis Levy. We spent, a month or more, Curtis, in some pretty exotic places. We went through Afghanistan, Pakistan, went to Turkey, briefly called in at London. We had about 6 hours sleep while Curtis went off and had fun. And then, of course, to America to catch up with David's Australian lawyer at that time, which was Stephen Kenny, and also the human rights place there. I can't remember the name. Gee, Mr. Howard, you've got Alzheimer's disease. Anyway, it was an interesting journey. And as I say, I have met a lot of interesting people. I've met some good groups of people, great groups of people that care about Australian citizens and what's been happening with them and how they're treating people. Not only the Muslims, I think that was an excuse. They need to have someone to blame for something, and unfortunately that culture suited our government. I personally have found that they've been okay. I've never struck any devious or strange reacting people amongst that group. So I don't know who Mr. Howard and Mr. Ruddock and Mr. Downer have been hanging around with. As for David, I don't know when he's coming home, and that's my honest answer. I'm hoping the media are right and I get home before him. If he gets home after me, I'll tell him off. So it's going to be good to have him back in Australia, on Australian soil. Once again, though, unfortunately, David's being demonised. Not from the federal government this time, from the South Australian state government. Mike Rand has now taken it upon himself to say that David is now a security risk. Even today, my wife rang me and said Channel 10 are now saying that Australia's most notorious criminal is coming to Australia. But I didn't realise John Howard had left Australia. Unfortunately, the media every now and again go on this little tangent where they have to come up with statements that are being made, I suppose, to incorporate what I call a fear factor, that something is being plotted, something's going to happen, and it's going to happen before the next elections, of course. That way Mr Howard and his cohorts can put up their hands and say, we've just arrested 13 people, we've arrested another 9, we've stopped all this business from happening. It was never going to happen in the first place. They need credibility, and this is the way they do it. With David's case, I always say that David's a token white person. He was the Westerner that they needed to prove that the war on terrorism was necessary. Mamdouh Habib has been home. I suppose, see, with Mamdouh Habib, you go back one generation and he's from Egypt, so that was no good. David Hicks, you can go back forever and he's still a true Westerner. So this is why I call him, he was the token white person that they needed, and they needed him to be found guilty. It took 5.5 years to eventually break David Hicks. As Tim said, it took 3 days to break the English. It took 2 weeks to break the American, John Walker Lynn. It took 5.5 years to break the Australian. Unfortunately, all this, right through these so-called military commissions, which John Howard's been touting as the best thing since someone walked on water. It hasn't worked. The first time they put it together, it failed. The second time they put it together, it fell apart. No one wanted to be on it. The third time it was put together, it was found illegal by the Supreme Court of America. George Bush decided to push it through Congress to change things around so it suited, and then pushed on ahead with it. The only way they could get David Hicks to plead guilty was through coercion. There's 3 ways of doing this. David Hicks, you plead guilty, you're going to get life. David Hicks, you plead not guilty, you're going to get 5 years extra by the time we set up the commissions through the appeals and everything else, and you're going to get 25 years. Plead guilty under the plea bargain and we'll have you home in a matter of 3 months on a short sentence. This was all put together 2 weeks before the arraignment. Mr Downer wasted a considerable amount of money by sending myself and my daughter all the way to Guantanamo Bay, knowing that David had already pleaded guilty through the process. I didn't mind. I don't mind spending the government's money. I had 2.5 hours with David, and I'd sooner listen to David than Mr Downer. All Mr Downer's saying at the moment is how much David Hicks has cost over the years. My argument to Mr Downer is, why didn't you put him on a commercial flight and send him home? It would have been cheaper and no one would have known who he was anyway. Just to finish off, the fight hasn't finished. A lot of people are saying now David Hicks is coming home, everything's all over, but it's not. Tim brought up some very good points tonight on the legalities, on the way David was brought back. I probably look at it a little bit different. I believe David has been rendered, which they don't do, from one country back to Australia, where he's now going to be kept in a state prison under laws that were pushed through by not even a court procedure, and then to plead guilty to the charges of material support to terrorism. Now, I may be stupid, but can anyone tell me what it is? Because all I can see in there, and I've spoke